I'm Lora here with TechCrunch at Disrupt in New York City. I'm here with the CEO of Eco Motors. It's a Khosla-backed and Bill Gates-backed clean technology venture that's involved in a more efficient combustion engine. It's a two-stroke, what is it, an OPOC?
OPOC, opposed piston, opposed cylinders. So it's a new invention.
Right, the two-stroke has been around for a long time. And
yeah.
What is the most distinct?
Yeah, I would say it's opposed pistons and opposed cylinders. So we have pistons that come together to create the combustion and the explosion. That is unusual. Today, engines have pistons and they pound their fist against the head, so to speak. And so that's one. It does have a power stroke every revolution of the crankshaft. So from that standpoint, it is a two-stroke engine. And that typically is much more simpler and has higher power density, more horsepower per pound than conventional engines. So we have a single crankshaft, a little more detail that's unusual in the opposed piston world. There's been opposed pistons, the Luftwaffe flew opposed piston engines in the 30s, and because they had high power density and generally more efficient than other conventional engines. Okay. We've made significant improvements since those days.
Right, moving beyond the specs. Can you tell me what sort of efficiency you can deliver? You said the upper range is 50% more efficient than a typical combustion vehicle, is that correct?
Yeah, we have pretty outrageous claims for the engine. On efficiency, we're between 15 and 50% more efficient, depending on the configuration. I showed a slide this morning on how two different versions work. We have twice the power density, so we're about half the weight and half the size of a conventional engine. When I say conventional engine, the engine that has been on the top of the pyramid now for a century is the four-stroke, the four-cycle engine. That's what you probably drove here today in taxi cabs. Everybody has four-stroke engines because it has been the best solution in terms of efficiency and so forth for a century.
Actually, I took an electric bus with an A123 battery. I learned from Runkle yesterday. But so, can you tell me a little bit about what it would take? You were the VP of engineering at GM and have had this distinguished career in automotive. What would it take for a company like GM or VW, where your co-founder or the inventor of this technology hailed from, to begin to use this in their production lines?
It's pretty straightforward because it's an engine change. So the car companies do engine changes all the time. You have a four-cylinder in and you want more power, so you end up putting a V6 in there, and so you have to change lines and radiators and stuff like that, but you don't have to redesign the whole car. And ours would be, since ours is half the size and half the weight, it's an engine swap. I would say it's far easier to change the engine from whatever they have to this engine than it is to make that car an electric car or a hybrid vehicle or a plug-in hybrid. That's combining two generally different types of technologies, internal combustion combined with electrification. I've done many of those, and so it's much easier to do that. Now, we could take advantage of our unique architecture. It's very low and very dense to make a car that was far more aerodynamic, because the hood line could be 1.5 feet lower, so not just millimeters, but a lot lower. Much more dense power is always a good thing. So if you were designing a new car, you could take advantage of it. But if you chose not to design a new car, but just take the advantage of the engine, you could put this in and do it. We're doing a vehicle right now with exchanging engines.
Can you tell me a little bit about the partnership with Navistar? What can we expect to see as a result of that deal?
Earlier this year, I think it was the end of February, we had a press conference. We signed a couple of deals with Navistar. Navistar is a big commercial vehicle engine and market leader in full-size trucks. And the one deal is a joint development agreement, doing the emissions development, completing our emissions development, improving efficiency and all the other things that they're interested in, with our architecture, however. And so that's the one contract, and it's a cost sharing to do that. And then we've also signed commercial agreements for licensing our technology, our architecture, so to speak, so that they would go into production and make engines. So that's basically the two things.
Okay. And
for commercial vehicles like class 4 through 8. Class 8 is like over-the-road big 18-wheelers. Class 6 is like delivery trucks and so forth.
When do those hit the road?
It's hard to say. It obviously depends on the success of the development agreement. I think if you would talk to their CEO, he would say, how about 2013? And if you talk to the guy over there that has to do it, Eric Tech, he'd probably say 2014. So,
okay.
but in and around that time frame.
Well, looking forward to seeing that. And a last closing yes or no question. You said on the main stage that people who believe that EV technology is sort of the end-all be-all for environmental concerns should be more aware of the full carbon footprint, because much of the world's electricity today is produced by coal. If you took out the coal equation and used renewables or emissions-free technologies somehow close to emissions-free, would your cars still be lower carbon footprint than an electric vehicle?
No, at that point it wouldn't be, because obviously we still have a carbon footprint. If you ignore where electricity comes from, you have a fairly low carbon footprint. But it's irrelevant, because you can't ignore where it comes from.
Yes, I appreciate the pragmatism. I think it's too often
You don't discover electricity. You discover oil, but you don't discover electricity. You make it. You don't discover hydrogen. You make it. And you have to count the making. You can't pretend it's not there. Now, you can do it with wind and other things like that, and they're unreliable from a when you turn your lights on, you want the lights to come on. You don't want to have to look out the window to find out if the wind's blowing or if the sun's out. So you need a way to store that energy over time. You can do it by pumping water uphill and running down. You can do it with batteries, you can do it with capacitors and so forth. But you can't ignore the making of electricity.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming out to New York, and shout out to Michigan.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here. It's a very interesting conference.
Happy travels.
Okay, thank you. Good.